working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus. On tonight's headlines.
For long-term investment decisions.
National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, said locating in the Philippines is a good investment for foreign businesses, as the country can serve as a gateway to the population-rich ASEAN nations. A direct flight from China landed in Indonesia's resort island of Bali for the first time in nearly 3 years after the route was suspended due to the pandemic. And Thailand will boycott a kickboxing event at the Southeast Asian Games in Cambodia in May, in a row with the hosts over what to call the sport. And Vietnamese unmanned systems company RT Robotics has unveiled an unmanned aerial vehicle system that is capable of dropping up to 9 grenades per sortie. First in our news, National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, said locating in the Philippines is a good investment for foreign businesses, as the country can serve as a gateway to the population-rich ASEAN nations. In his speech at the Philippine Economic Briefing in Frankfurt, Germany, NEDA Secretary Arsenio Balisacan noted that the Philippines has a population of 110 million, while the entire ASEAN has 680 million people. Let's listen in.
For long-term investment decisions. So, what is in it for investors and businesses? The Philippines is a fast-growing economy of over 110 million people. Apart from having a sizable domestic consumer market, it can serve as a competitive launching pad for the ASEAN economies, home to over 680 million people, roughly 9% of the world population. The Philippines is in the midst of reaping the demographic dividend, where a growing and young working population can fuel economic growth for the next 2 to 3 decades. And as we have mentioned, we are more open to business now more than ever, with investors having a wide array of industries to choose from. With all of our transformative reforms and initiatives set into motion, the Philippines is poised to regain its preeminence in Southeast Asia and beyond.
In order to sustain recent economic gains, Mr. Balisacan said the government is prepared to support its people by enacting policies and programs focused on education, health, and labor. The government, the NEDA Secretary said, will focus on revitalizing the industry sector with technology in order to make the country's products and exports more competitive. Meanwhile, the government will also focus on transforming the services sector into a modern and productive sector. Tourism, information technology, and the business process outsourcing, or BPO industries, will become strong growth drivers for the economy. In a press conference in Malacanang, Transportation Secretary Jaime Bautista disclosed that President Marcos Jr. instructed them to fast-track the signing of a new agreement with the maintenance provider of NAIA, the Sumitomo Thales. The measure is meant to prevent another glitch of NAIA similar to what happened earlier this month, which led to the cancellation of over 600 flights. Now, to ensure NAIA will be maintained, Mr. Bautista also reiterated their plans to privatize the operations of the facility through a concession agreement. Mr. Bautista gave assurances, however, that if the concession agreement pushes through, the third-party operator of NAIA will not be allowed to raise fees without authorization from the government. Take a look.
He also instructed us to continue the maintenance of all existing equipments, no? And at the same time, he wants us to fast-track the arrangement for a maintenance agreement with Sumitomo and Thales, who is the provider of the system. No? So
Pero meron yatang kinukontrata na private sector group from New York na magmamanage po ng operation. Tama po ba yon?
Thank you, Eden. No? Ang ibig sabihin ng presidente, no, hindi naman natin ibibigay sa private sector yung assets ng NAIA. No? Ang ibig niyang sabihin ay it's the private sector who will manage the operations, no, through a concession agreement, no, which is what we have been doing in 2 airports now, no, sa Cebu at sa Clark, no. Cebu is operated by GMR Megawide, no, although yung asset talaga ay asset naman ng gobyerno, kaya hindi naman na privatized yung infrastructure, no. This is also the same with the operations of Clark International Airport, no. Yung asset remained with the government, but yung operations ay ginagawa ng private sector.
Are we expecting po na parang kagaya sa mga toll expressways, baka po magkaroon ng pagtaas sa mga airfare or sa mga ibang services po ng ating mga paliparan?
Hindi naman automatic na tataas, no? Kasi yung regulatory function will remain with the government, no? And the government will have a say in the rates that the operators will impose, no? So hindi ibig sabihin na tataas kaagad, no?
Now, the proposal was opposed by labor groups who expressed concern that the turnover of the NAIA operations will lead to mass displacement of airport workers and lead to a higher terminal fee for passengers. Meanwhile, a direct flight from China landed in Indonesia's resort island of Bali for the first time in nearly 3 years after the route was suspended due to the pandemic. At least 210 people were on board the chartered plane operated by Indonesia's Lion Air from Shenzhen in China's southern Guangdong province. According to VOA News, the flight followed the Chinese government's decision to lift travel restrictions announced January 8, and it coincided with the start of the Lunar New Year, which was being marked Sunday. Now, the Shenzhen to Bali route will operate once a week during its initial phase, according to a statement from Danang Mandala Prihantoro, a spokesman for Lion Air. Indonesia is targeting 255,000 tourists from China this year. Indonesia recorded 94,924 visits from China from January to October last year. More than 2 million tourists from China visited Indonesia each year before the pandemic. The return of Chinese tourists is expected to support the overall target of foreign tourist arrivals this year. Indonesia aims to record 3.5 million to 7.4 million foreign visits, according to Sandiaga, the Minister of Tourism and Creative Economy, in a statement earlier on Friday. In tonight's other news type, police seized 1.1 tons of crystal methamphetamine in less than a week, according to officers, as the kingdom cracks down on smuggling that has surged since the country's borders reopened. The haul comes after a spike in clashes between police and smugglers in the kingdom's remote northern hinterlands, long a hub for the trade in illegal narcotics. Take a look.
ดังนั้นเนี่ยประเทศไทยเป็นประเทศที่จะต้องผ่านประเทศไทยแน่นอนอยู่แล้วเพราะว่าแหล่งผลิตต้องอยู่รอบข้างประเทศไทยเนี่ยที่จะมานะครับส่วนที่จะถามเพิ่มมากขึ้นไหมผมมองว่าในช่วงโควิดเนี่ยมันเป็นการปิดทั้งหมดทั้งประเทศไม่มีการเข้าออกได้เลยเนี่ยนะครับมันตอนนั้นน่ะเขาอาจจะผลิตของเขาทิ้งไว้ไปเรื่อยถึงตอนนี้พอมีการเริ่มเปิดประเทศ
Now, Thailand will boycott a kickboxing event at the Southeast Asian Games in Cambodia in May, according to officials, in a row with the hosts over what to call the sport. Now, Thai officials are angry at plans by Cambodia to refer to the event, which they regard as their national sport, on the official program as Khun Mer instead of Muay Thai. While the name Muay Thai may be better known around the world, Cambodian officials insist the sport originated from their Khmer culture. The event is one of a series of combat sports at the 11-country regional games, alongside regular kickboxing, karate, taekwondo, Kun Bokator, and Vovinam. Cambodia is hosting the games for the first time in 60 years. Now, Charawen Watansin, vice chairman of the National Olympic Committee of Thailand, said the International Olympic Committee had not endorsed the term Khun Mer. Now they are violating international regulations for sports competition, he told AFP. The Thai Boxing Association won't be sending athletes to compete, he said. Now, Cambodian sports officials are refusing to back down. Vat Chamroryun, Secretary General of the Cambodian Southeast Asian Games Organizing Committee, said, and I quote, "We are the host country, so we have the right to change it to Khun Mer, as the sport has its origin in Khmer and it is our culture." The two kingdoms have repeatedly clashed over their cultural heritage, with 2011 seeing several months of bloody military conflict over a disputed temple on the border. In other news, Thai fishermen and business owners have filed lawsuits worth $150 million against a subsidiary of U.S. energy giant Chevron over a huge oil spill last year, according to lawyers. Let's take a look back.
การขูดเอาหน้าทรายก่อนขูดที่น้ำมันติดหน้าทรายขูดให้ลึกไปจนหมดคราบน้ำมันแล้วก็ทำการบรรจุถุงแล้วก็ทำการเคลื่อนย้ายออกไปครับทีนี้มาเจอนี่เลยกลายเป็น2 เด้ง 3 เด้งเลยทีนี้ไอ้เนี่ยผลกระทบก็คืออันนี้มันกระทบโดยตรงแล้วทีนี้ก็จะสั่งปิดหาดแล้วทำไงของเต็มหมดเลยปลาปูเนี่ยเต็มไปหมดเลยแล้วทำยังไงครับ
Now, more than 60 tons of oil was pumped into the Gulf of Thailand last January after an issue with the pipeline operated by Star Petroleum Refining Public Company, or SPRC. Crews scrambled to clean up the spill off Rayong province, roughly 2 hours drive from the capital Bangkok, with images from the time showing the picturesque and popular beaches slick with oil. SPRC, whose major shareholders is Chevron, is accused of failing to properly maintain the pipeline that caused the leak, according to lawsuits filed by Rising Sun Law. The firm, which represents 837 people, including fishermen, tourism operators, and residents, claimed in the suits that the leak wasn't adequately addressed by the companies. SPRC and Chevron did not respond to requests for comment. Meanwhile, fighting has flared in recent days between Myanmar junta forces and rebels opposed to their rule, according to officials and locals, with reports that large numbers of civilians have fled the violence. Now, Myanmar has been in turmoil since Aung San Suu Kyi's civilian government was toppled in an army coup almost 2 years ago. Long-established ethnic rebel groups, as well as dozens of People's Defense Forces, have emerged in opposition and clash frequently with the military. The last few days have seen intense clashes in southeast Karen State around Kyeonado and the border town of Payatonzu. There were drone attacks by local PDFs at a military command near Kyeonado town a few days ago, according to a military source. Now, this comes as Karen armed forces attacked Payatonzu, around 180 kilometers to 110 miles to the south on the Thai border, on Monday night. Now, they burned down several government departments, including the Immigration, Military Intelligence, and Administration bureaus. More than 2,700 civilians have been killed since the military grabbed power in February 2022, or 2021 rather, according to a local monitoring group. The junta blames anti-coup fighters for a civilian death toll it has put at almost 3,900. Now, the 5th International Day of Education was celebrated on January 24 under the theme to invest in people, prioritize education. For more, here's Arlene Ocampo from our Washington, D.C. Bureau.
January 24 is the International Day of Education. In observance, the United Nations sends out a message to invest in people and prioritize education. In a message, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says education is a fundamental human right, the bedrock of societies, economies, and every person's potential. However, Gutierrez says without adequate investment, the potential will fail.
Today is the International Day of Education, and the theme is to invest in people and prioritize education. In his message for the occasion, the Secretary General urged countries to invest in supportive and inclusive learning environments so that all students can achieve their full potential, and warned that without adequate investment, this potential will wither on the vine. The UN chief also stressed that it's time to end all discriminatory laws and practices that hinder access to education. He called for the de facto authorities in Afghanistan in particular to reverse the outrageous and self-defeating ban on access to secondary and higher education for girls.
He says investment is critical to achieving Sustainable Development Goal number 4. Sustainable Development Goal number 4 is free, equitable, and quality education for all by 2030. Gutierrez says now is the time for all countries to translate their commitments into concrete actions. Actions that create supportive and inclusive learning environments for all students. He says now is also the time to end all discriminatory laws and practices that hinder access to education. According to UNICEF, over 600 million children and adolescents across the globe are unable to attain minimum proficiency levels both in reading and mathematics. This despite 2/3 of them being in school. And worse is the case for out-of-school children because their foundational skills in literacy and numeracy are further from grasp. Arlene Ocampo, Washington, D.C., Eagle News, we live in extraordinary times.
Thanks, Arlene. Meanwhile, Japan and South Korea's Coast Guards were searching today for 8 crew from a cargo ship that sank between the two countries after 14 others were rescued. Take a look. Now, a total of 14 have been rescued, according to a spokesman for the Japanese Coast Guard telling AFP. And he said, we don't know their condition and nationalities yet, he added, declining to be named. He also said 6 of the crew had been rescued by South Korea's Coast Guard, which was assisting the operation. 11 of those rescued so far were unconscious. The Jeju Coast Guard told AFP, adding that the rescued crew members were being transported to Japan's southwestern Nagasaki. The accident came as a cold snap hits much of Asia, with daytime temperatures in some of the Japanese islands nearest the rescue site reaching just 3 degrees Celsius. Now, the 6,651-ton Jintian is registered in Hong Kong, and the crew on board included 14 Chinese nationals and 8 people from Myanmar, according to the Japan's Coast Guard. A woman in New York State has filed a lawsuit against Mike Tyson, accusing the former boxing champion of raping her in a limousine in the early 1990s, according to court filings. The woman, who asked the court to remain anonymous, filed her complaint in early January under a temporary New York State law allowing victims of sexual assault to seek civil damages regarding of the statute of limitations. In a short affidavit dated December 23 last year, the plaintiff states that she met the boxer at a nightclub in the early 1990s and then followed him into his limousine, where he allegedly assaulted her before raping her. Now she's seeking a $5 million in damages. By late Tuesday, Mr. Tyson had not issued any public statement. Tyson spent 3 years in jail beginning in 1992 after being found guilty of raping model Desiree Washington, who was 18 at that time. And finally, the Vietnamese Defense Exhibition held at the GLM Airport near Hanoi attracted over 170 exhibitors, about 60 from Vietnam and the rest from 30 countries. The exhibition also featured several Vietnamese-developed drones and radars and air defense systems dating back to the Vietnam War. Now, Vietnamese unmanned systems company RT Robotics has unveiled an unmanned aerial vehicle or UAV system that is capable of dropping up to 9 grenades per sortie. The system, which has been dubbed as HERA, Individual Combat Drone, is man-portable and propelled by 4 rotor wings. RT Robotics is a subsidiary of Vietnamese conglomerate Citigroup, which also has business in real estate, finance, construction, and technology sectors. Now, during the Vietnam International Defense Exhibition, or VIDEX 2022, which took place in Hanoi from December 8 to 10 last year, a representative from the company, Quoc Luong, said that the HERA UAV has been fully developed in country by Vietnamese engineers. Now, Vietnam has adopted the Make in Vietnam policy, similar to India's, to strengthen the capabilities of its local defense industry and support significant defense procurement programs. As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast of ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.